I want to start by showing you the front and back covers of this book. Cynthia Rylant wrote the story. Stephen Gammell created the illustrations with colored pencils. Let's look at the title. This is called The Relatives Came. Where do you see relatives? I notice there are relatives in the station wagon. Look at all these relatives. Relatives are people such as your cousins, uncles, or aunts. Your grandparents, parents, brothers, and sisters are also your relatives. What is the name of one of your relatives who does not live with you? What do you call that person? What does the title tell you about what might happen in the story? The relatives came. I wonder if they're going to have some sort of family reunion in this book. Let's read and find out. There's some luggage. I see a suitcase. And of course a teddy bear and some sneakers. Oh goodness. Look at all the luggage. And a picnic basket. Clothes hanging from a clothesline. Wow. Tells me there might be a lot of relatives arriving in this book. Okay. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. Look at them packing up the car. They're putting their travel gear on the roof of the car, in the trunk of the car, and look, they have a whole line of luggage that they have to cram into that car. Will there be any room for the people? I wonder what they packed inside their luggage. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car, and in it they put an ice chest full of soda pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches, and up they came from Virginia. They left at 4 a.m. when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. Oh no, look what's happening. Oh, well, there goes one of their pieces of luggage. Looks like a very long and windy road that they're driving down. They must live out in the country. I don't see any houses or buildings. They drove all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. So they drank up all their pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. Boy, they sure arrived with a bang, didn't they? Crashed right into the fence. There goes all the rest of the luggage. Maybe they were so excited to see their relatives running towards them that they weren't paying attention. Crashed into the fence. Then it was hugging time. talk about hugging. Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. They hugged us for hours. What is happening here? What do you notice about all the relatives? Makes me wonder if maybe they haven't seen each other for a really long time since they lived so far away. So they must be so excited to finally be able to hug each other and spend time together. Then it was into the house and so much laughing and shining faces and hugging in the doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front room. Those relatives. Oh my goodness, look at them all packed into the house. You could see them through the windows hugging each other. And finally, after a big supper 2 or 3 times around until we all got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s through the house. So it sounds like they had to take turns sitting at the table to eat. So they had to eat in shifts, sort of like in the cafeteria at school. We have to have time for the first group to go through, and then they leave, the next group comes in, and then they leave, the next group comes in. This page makes me laugh. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras. So a few squeezed in with us, and the rest slept on the floor. Some with their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. It was different going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. I bet some of them must snore. What do you notice about how they're all sleeping? That's a lot of family members sharing one room. The relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden and they fixed any broken things they could find. They ate up all our strawberries and melons, then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. What are the children doing? What are the adults doing? There's a lot of things going on in this picture. I see some of the relatives are playing musical instruments. I see, they're fixing the fence that got crashed into. Eating some watermelon. This one is holding a baby and a big chunk of watermelon. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging and eating and breathing together. How do you know that the relatives are still having fun together? Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia at 4 in the morning. We stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road. Then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet. We fell asleep. Why do you think the author said the beds felt too big and too quiet? Do you think it's because they got so used to sharing the space with all their relatives and now it feels empty without them there? And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about the next summer. Does this page give you a clue about next summer's visit? I wonder if maybe this time the other relatives will come visit them in Virginia. There's the bunch of grapes. Why do you think the illustrator decided to end the book with a bunch of grapes? I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did. It makes me think back of visits with my relatives who don't live near here and how good it is to see them after a long, long journey. Do any of you have relatives that live far away that you don't get to see very often? Think about how it feels when you are finally able to see them and enjoy spending time together.